What's up, guys? Jack Dallas here. It's been a long while for sure. I've had a lot of craziness going on in my personal life, quite a bit of traveling, been away from my computer for a month or so. Some of you might have seen, I just kind of have been tweeting out some articles that pique my interest on my phone, but not too much as far as making videos. But I'm happy to be back at my regular desk. And, before I sat down to do anything, feature length, I decided to just hit some of the major stories that have been catching my eye lately. And, I thought I'd start out with something kind of simple since it's been a little while, and I really, really just want to get a video out now that I have a day to myself here at my regular desk. So, the major stories you'll see here happen to coincide with the ones that I wanted to discuss. So I wanted to talk about, Super Tuesday, the whole presidential election craziness going on. Wanted to talk about the phone, guys. I wanted to talk about Apple and the FBI and the phone. And I also wanted to talk about a topic that, as I scroll through, unfortunately, I don't really see at the top, but it should be, is the continuing conflict going on in Libya. A topic that, I was pretty interested in when Gaddafi was still alive and definitely afterwards as well. But, when that conflict was happening, I was pretty interested in it. So as it's kind of resurging as a point of violence, Libya, not that it was ever good after the NATO invasion, it's just something that I think I'd like to address. So let's start with the presidential election, guys. I mean, I guess the way I would put it is, somewhat playing out the way that I thought it would, just not necessarily with the exact Republican character, shall we say. Not that I said it was going to be, Rubio or Cruz, quite the opposite. My prediction going back a while, if any of you remember, was basically that Hillary would easily clinch the Democratic nomination and that the Republicans would nominate somebody, I guess I would say from outside the usual circle. And the reason for that, to be simple about it, is basically I felt the Republicans knew that they were going to lose this race pretty easily, and I think they sort of felt a need to not sacrifice one of their main guys, is the simple way to put it. When you run for president and lose, like Mitt Romney, you don't really have the chance to do it again, in normal politics. It's sort of a one and done thing. And I think people like Rubio, Cruz, even Jeb Bush, want the chance to run when they think they actually have a shot to win. Now, another thing I predicted, which I kind of just wanted to touch on, was I said the next time there is a Republican president, it will probably be Jeb Bush. I just felt like the cards were in his favor. But man, he has been doing so badly, and we just saw him drop out recently. But he's been doing worse than I thought, to be honest. Not much worse, but noticeably worse than I thought he would have. And now I question myself on that prediction. That being said, the idea of Trump coming in, now, I mean, I never said it was going to be Trump, but I did say it was probably going to be somebody from outside the usual political, establishment, not a career politician. And I think that was kind of, you know, vindicated with Trump kind of leading the way here. And I think it will be Trump Hillary. And that's an interesting race. But, as I move on to the next article, obviously, current strategy and the way that things are going, everybody on the left is doing their best to come up with, the various strategies to beat Trump. And a lot of them, as you can see, have to do with the whole bigotry thing and all the comments that Trump tends to make. He sort of fires from the hip when it comes to making comments about race and religion and whatever. And a lot of that is obviously taken out of context, just being how the media, portrays things and how they display favoritism and how they do things like that. But I think it's pretty obvious that what's going to happen is essentially not a political discussion. It's going to be more of a personal discussion in the sense that you're just going to see a lot of personal attacks on both candidates. Now, when we talk about Hillary, the obvious things people, bring up in terms of her being questionable or, whatever, the stereotypical stuff, the emails, Benghazi, this and that. I'm not really here to discuss those individual topics today. What I want to point out is simply the fact that I don't find it so surprising uh, where Trump is being placed right now in the polls, shall we say, compared to Hillary. I don't think it's surprising that the race is all of a sudden panning out to be a close race. People are saying it's going to be very close in November, and some people are surprised that the margin is looking like it's going to be that close. I'm not so surprised, and I don't think that everybody, necessarily feels that way. But what's really going on here, in my opinion, is not Trump doing so well. Surprisingly, I think it's just Hillary doing so badly. I think she's kind of an unlikable candidate to a lot of people in a simple sense, and I think that maybe more so than presidential candidates in the past, maybe just maybe her past and maybe the things she's done are finally catching up with her more so than other politicians. Past presidents, Obama, definitely Bush, Clinton, they had dirt on them at the time that they were running, but not really enough for it to, I guess I would say, tip the race. I mean, obviously, look at the results, but even so, the discussion was never overwhelming about, things like that. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that for Hillary, all of a sudden, things that could have maybe, slid off the backs of other presidential candidates are being portrayed more negatively for her. This has nothing to do with her being a woman or anything like that. I just think that people are kind of finally starting to take politicians to task more, being that things are getting so kind of bad here in America. And on the other hand, I think that Hillary's transgressions have just been so egregious, and her, just unabashed attitude in terms of how she addresses it, she just does not seem to care. I think that she sort of comes off as the kind of person that almost doesn't mind having her corruption out in public. It just seems so egregiously obvious to me, and I think that people are reacting to it more negatively than the Democrats might have expected. Um, I'm still going to say that she's going to have a clear cut victory, guys, but what I'm starting to think about now is not 2016, but the next presidential race. Because, like I said, I mean, I think Hillary's going to win, but I think people are already going to be going into it rather questioningly, and I think 2020 is going to be interesting because I don't think it's going to be, so clear cut, and I think there's going to be a big fight. That to me is going to be an interesting year for sure. That being said, I really think the Democrats have it locked up. I just think that Hillary is going to face more negativity than she might have expected because basically her transgressions are too large to be swept under the rug, is essentially what I'm trying to say here. So, moving on, the next big topic. I don't have much to say because things are kind of just heating up again here, but Libya, once again, the classic story. We're basically told that we're, as NATO, as the West, we're helping a natural uprising of the people. Of course, that turns out to be not the case. We're just helping to institute, number one, political change that favors the West and essentially getting rid of a leader who wasn't playing ball with us in terms of fiscal policy. Gaddafi was dangerous because he discussed the dinar, a gold-backed currency that would be used by the OPEC countries. He was dangerous because he was not a supporter of, the typical, you know, worldwide central banks and, typical banking policies that are in place in most of the world, especially Europe and America. And at the same time, he was essentially the major player in Africa. So if you want to control the North African region, you have to control Libya. And Gaddafi was not somebody who was willing to be controlled. Of course, the other major factor being Israel, who definitely didn't want him there. Nobody's really going to talk about that, but Israel is a huge factor in getting rid of Gaddafi, and of course, the entire conflict going on in the Middle East. But what's interesting is I pulled up this article in the Wall Street Journal, and here we have Army Brigadier General Donald Balduch, something like that. I'm not really sure. Of course, classic, talking about we're going to need American help to defeat Islamic State. Once again, ISIS being used as the sort of catch-all evil that we have to go and fight. Now they're in Libya, we got to go back. Of course, a few years ago, we were told that getting rid of Gaddafi was going to stop the violence, that that was going to get rid of the terrorists, that his regime was the terrorist regime. And of course, it's been a million times worse since getting rid of his government, despite any transgressions that might have happened. And it's become a hotbed for violence and terrorism, only in increased proportions since that conflict. So once again, America just expecting people to sort of, believe that this kind of foreign policy is going to lead to peace somehow, and it never does. Who's happy to hear about more conflicts? Obviously, defense contractors, military industrial complex, and again, using IS as this catch-all enemy that we have to go fight. Well, if we have to go fight ISIS no matter what, and they're in Libya, now we have to go to Libya. And part of me thinks that this is because what's going on in Syria is all of a sudden starting to not favor America as much as they might have expected. And maybe they just look at this as an opportunity to ramp things up elsewhere. I don't really know about that. We're going to have to wait and see. But of course, if we look up the brigadier general who's making these comments, deputy director of operations for the United States African Command since August 2013. So of course, we have more typical military-industrial complex insiders supporting war. They're supporting increased profits for the people that got them to the positions they're in. They are supporting increased profits for the companies that are giving the money that gets the politicians elected that are willing to fight the wars. And people that are voting for them essentially believe that they're getting a choice when it comes to foreign policy, but they're really not. And I can tell you one thing. I mean, it seems like, Trump is the guy who, might come off as the more violent type, the kind of guy who wants to go after people in terms of foreign policy. But make no mistake about it, Hillary definitely supports, going after it. Just look at her voting record in terms of the recent wars we've had. And also, she's definitely working hand in hand with the Zionists, and she supports these wars in the Middle East. She's always been, someone who's been supported by essentially the Jewish lobby because she's always been supportive of their military conflicts, regardless of whether or not they have anything to do with America or should have anything to do with the West or NATO. So anyway, I just wanted to point it out that the very people that are writing opinion pieces for our foreign policy that are influencing, trillion-dollar decisions and obviously decisions that affect people's lives day to day, are literally people that are in the military, the people that are dropping the bombs, and the people that are profiting from it. So is that the person that you want to listen to? Do you want to be listening to a guy whose paycheck is directly correlated with whether or not we go to war with a country that has nothing to do with us? I mean, I'll leave that one to you. And of course, the last topic, guys, the phone. The fucking phone. Pretty tired of hearing about this topic. So I had to address it just because it's been, in the news so much recently, but I don't buy it. Here we are right up front. As soon as I went to USA Today this morning, they were talking about it. And of course, one of my favorite people, John McAfee, has been discussing, the whole Apple FBI phone controversy. So what do I want to discuss with this? Just a couple key points. And I haven't had enough time to really look into all of them, which is kind of why I saved this topic for last. So, number one, I have a really hard time believing that the FBI doesn't have the capability to crack this phone. Now, I think some other people have said this, but it's not been the main discussion. Obviously, the main discussion that you are, supposed to be thinking about is, should Apple give up the method to unlock this phone, or should they, support privacy above all and kind of like withhold this information just to prevent the FBI from using it in the future? And to most people, this is the real discussion, but in reality, this is kind of just, it's like the magician trying to keep your eyes on his hands when the real trick is happening somewhere else. And really, to me, that what this trick is about is trying to make people think that their privacy is protected at all. I think the fact that this conversation is happening in the media is essentially a way for people to think that they actually have protection, that the FBI doesn't have these capabilities, or the NSA or the government doesn't already possess these techniques to crack your phone. So now if you have an iPhone, you you automatically assume a certain level of privacy, having heard this story because, oh, the FBI, they're kind of hamstrung by Apple now, so you think you're good. So on the one hand, does this benefit Apple? Yes, because it makes them look kind of tough. A lot of their customers are the kind of people that sort of like that kind of pro-privacy, anti-government. They kind of like Tim Cook, their CEO, stepping up and kind of shaking his fist and saying no to the government. I think that's what their people like. Um, and it also makes Apple look like a very strong, privacy uh, centric company, so that more people would be interested in purchasing their phones because they would feel more secure. So it also benefits Apple from an economic standpoint to have this stuff in the media. As far as the government, I mean, again, it might, to some people, it might make them look a little foolish for quote unquote not being able to, crack this phone. But it also gives them the guise of not having these abilities already. So for the government, their real aim is to sort of have you read this story and think, wow, they really don't have the ability to crack this. I mean, maybe the NSA is stealing my text messages, but oh, Obama told them to stop doing that, and look at this, they can't even get the San Bernardino guy's phone, so, no matter what, I'm good, my information is safe. So it kind of throws people off the trail of the government as well, because now they think, hey, the government either isn't doing this, or even if they wanted to, they can't. Um, and now they're going to have this, I see a face off in Congress, of course, just more of a media spectacle. Meanwhile, if the government wants anything on your phone, they can have it. So just know that ahead of time. And essentially, what we have to be doing is not deciding whether to buy Androids or iPhones. We have to be avoiding technologies that are capable of being, hacked if we have to, do things that require that. So basically, if you want to be someone that shares information freely, if you feel like you know, don't want to have your privacy threatened, then you probably just shouldn't be putting that information on a phone, period. I wouldn't be believing stories like this. Interestingly, John McAfee commenting a lot on this story. I find this guy really interesting. I talk about him from time to time. Offered to crack the phone in 3 weeks, and he said it would take just 30 minutes, but he wanted to give himself 3 weeks. And basically offered to do it. Again, it could just be part of the whole media spectacle. Who really knows? Um, but he offered to do it, and they won't really discuss it. So again, it kind of plays into my whole thing of, I just think they have this capability. I think they've had it all along, and I think this is all a ruse to make people think that they don't have the capability to hack your information. Those are my thoughts, guys. So again, I just wanted to get a quick video out there because I'm really excited to have the ability to do so finally. And I have a few topics that I'm really looking forward to discussing at greater length. So feel free to let me know what you think. I'm getting around to answering some emails, and I'm looking forward to talking to you guys soon. See you later.